So, how do you decide what to give somebody when you're giving them a gift? Do you give them something you think they need? Well, we did that today. We're giving some people some food, and we think that they need that. Or maybe you give them something that they think that they like. I know they like this, so I'm going to give them that sort of a thing. Or maybe it's something you like, and you want them to enjoy it just the same. So the gifts that were brought to the Christ child in Bethlehem tell us something about those who were bearing the gifts, maybe what they had in mind, what they thought was appropriate. But more importantly, they tell us about the one who received the gifts. They tell us something about Jesus. The gift of gold is the gift of that was royalty. We had 3 majestic ones here today, and it gives us an image of the palace and of everything so perfect. It is that which only kings would be able to have. And when we think of the King of the Jews, maybe we think back to, well, that time of crossing the desert, leaving that monarch, the Pharaoh in Egypt, and crossing the desert, and then they get into their own land, and God raises up judges for them for quite a while. It was sort of like the Articles of Confederacy in the United States. There were these different tribes, and if God would raise up somebody to be their leader when there was a problem. But pretty soon, they decided that we're different from everybody else, and we want to be the same as everybody else. We want to have a king like everybody else. And God said, no, you don't want a king, because I know what kings do. Kings will take your sons and put them into the army, and they will be slaughtered on the battlefield, and kings will take your young women and put them to work in the palace, scrubbing and cooking and cleaning, and you don't want a king. And they said, oh yes, we want a king. And so they got a king. But the king that God was sending them in Jesus was a king that was not like those sort of kings. This was a king who brought in the kingdom of God with parables, with these stories, these earthly stories that have a heavenly meaning. The kingdom of God is like a shepherd who's lost a sheep. And you know how that continues on. It's like a woman who has lost a very valuable coin. That's what God's kingdom is like. Not about armies and palaces and gold and great shows that the royalty would. The kingdom of God is like yeast. Just a little bit of it. And you are that yeast. A little bit of it in the world leavens the whole world. The kingdom of God is like a lost son who father waits and waits and waits with open arms for his return, and then throws him a party after he has spent foolishly half of the man's money. And so when this King Herod, he was the one of the kingdom, not of parables, but the king of power, and I'm going to show you. And Pontius Pilate, the representative, the governor of Caesar in Rome, who really had the palaces and really had all of the gold, they were the ones thinking not about the parables, not about how the kingdom comes in the things of the earth, of seeds and soil and of the birds of the air, that the kingdom of God comes in love and grace and mercy. But they said that people are calling you the King of the Jews. And they were laughing when they said that, because it was so ridiculous. He didn't have any of the gold or the frankincense. He didn't have any of that. And Jesus says, well, you have said so. But my kingdom is not of this world. And then as they placed him on his royal throne, we call that a cross. That is where he gives judgment, and his judgment is forgiveness. Father, forgive them, and mercy to the thief beside him. Today you will be with me in paradise. A king and a throne, nothing like what we know of this world. And then they brought frankincense. And that's kind of fun. You know, people were smelly back then. And you needed some perfume. And they didn't have showers. And they didn't have all of what we have today. And you don't get eau de cologne and all of that. So they didn't have aftershave. So they had some frankincense. And it kind of covers up the natural smells that may not be so appreciated. That's what people thought frankincense was all about. But the Jews also knew that in that slaughterhouse in the temple where the animals are slaughtered, that was a smelly place too. And so they had incense there, and the priest would light the incense before the slaughter and the burning of animals would start. And it was also a sign of going up to heaven and a prayer. Now that's what the incense there that the priest would use. But Jesus is now going to be not only a king of a different kind than the world has ever known, but a priest of a different kind that the world has ever known, because there has been no high priest who has ever offered himself as a sacrifice for anybody until Jesus. And he would be the one there offering himself as a sacrifice and raising in prayer his cry of, what is this all going to turn out? My God, how have you forsaken me? And also that prayer of surrender into your hands. I trust you, God. I surrender my spirit. So gold prepared for a king, but the true riches, the treasure buried in the earth of the parable of that Jesus, the true treasure, is not the stuff of gold and the kings of this world, but it is the stuff of love and mercy and forgiveness. And then comes this very strange gift of myrrh. Myrrh, if you remember, here we have this gift, but it comes at the end of the story too. The story of myrrh, because we have it at Christmas and we have it at Easter. Remember the women coming with their spices and myrrh in order to anoint the body of Jesus, to preserve it. And remember, Jesus was wrapped in bands of cloth at the birth. Also, Jesus' body taken down from the cross is wrapped in bands of cloth. Not lying in a manger, but in a tomb now. Yes, this child king and priest has done more for us than any king or priest of this world. God's kingdom that Pilate and Herod had no idea what it even meant. That is the reality that is coming to overcome all that is dark and evil in this world. And he brings this darkness into the very darkest corners of the world. That with his riches and his love, his sacrifice of his very own life, we then become the bearers to the world of that which is the true treasure, of bringing that leaven into the world, of bringing that welcome to all people, of bringing that treasure that we just stumble upon because it is God's gift to us, not of our own earning or deserving it. We have been given the gifts of God's love and forgiveness in baptism, and now we offer them to one another. It is truly the greatest gift that you have for one another, for parents, for children, for parents, that those symbols that we wrap in paper and open on Christmas are signs of the greater love, the love and mercy that we share with one another. It may be a stranger, it may be somebody who needs a coat or a blanket or a prayer shawl. Maybe they don't even need one, but I know how much they treasure them once they receive them. Nobody put on their Christmas list, I wish for a prayer shawl. I bet unless then they get it and they go, wow, all of these people have been praying for me and will continue. Or a backpack for the kids who have very little, or food for those who are hungry here in our own area. Or maybe it's just a phone call, a how are you doing? Or a meal for someone when someone dies, or when they're just getting back from the hospital. I see this leaven, this kingdom of God entering into the world through you and this congregation again and again and again every day. It is an extension of these symbols of the things of this world that extend in reality in your love and your care and mercy for one another. This is the way the kingdom of God enters into our lives. It's the way of forgiveness and the way that life is restored. So God has given you the greater gifts. These symbols that we use, gold, frankincense, maybe even myrrh, some money, some presents that we wrap and put under a tree. Yes, those are symbols of that greater gift of the kingdom of God. So, to whom will you give these greater gifts? How far would you be willing to travel to offer them? And what will it cost you?